I would like to start by saying, whether you believe in demons or not, I can for one say that I know they are real and do exist. What I am about to share with you are real events and not fictional. This is why I mention no names, including the demon's name. I get chills just recounting these encounters. To preface, I am a 45-year-old gay male. My demonic encounter started when I moved into my first apartment in the summer of 1992. I was 20 at the time. Unfortunately, my demonic encounter lasted for nearly 8 years before I could finally get rid of it for good. I will only cover a few of the most terrifying encounters that happened over that 8-year period. Now, on to my story. I had moved to Casper, Wyoming, a town about 55 miles from where I graduated from high school that year. A friend of mine turned me on to a cute 2-bedroom apartment on Elm Street. Yes, I did say Elm Street, folks. The apartment was the basement floor of a 2-story house that had been converted into 2 apartments. My friend had recently moved into the main floor apartment and suggested my then boyfriend at the time and I take the bottom unit. It was an ideal situation since we all worked at the same mall at the time. It was mid-June, and there was no air conditioning in the apartment at the time, so as you can imagine, it was pretty flipping hot in that apartment. I was in the middle of painting the master bedroom when I decided to take a break from the fumes and the heat and headed to the kitchen to get a tall glass of iced tea and have a quick smoke. Now keep in mind, I was the only one in the apartment at the time as my boyfriend was working. If I recall, it was around 11 p.m. and he was not due home until after 1 a.m. or around there. After I finished my smoke, I headed back to the bedroom to finish painting. As I walked back into the room, every hair on my entire body stood on end. My heart began to beat out of my chest as I realized there was something painted on the opposite wall where I had been painting. There was no paint spilled on the carpet, and the brush I had been using was right where I left it. Heart still pounding, I slowly crept up to the wall. The paint was still wet and slowly dripping down the wall. I gasped in horror as I read what was painted on the wall. It simply read,
I am here.
I bolted the fuck out of there and waited outside on the stoop until my boyfriend came home from work. I was not about to go back to the apartment again by myself. My boyfriend, being a skeptic, dismissed it as maybe something I had done myself without remembering, or that the upstairs neighbor had snuck in and painted it, even though they were not home at the time that the occurrence had happened. Fast forward a few months. We had been gone all day, and it was late when we got home. Having an early day the next day, I headed for the shower while he grabbed himself a beer. As I was showering, I heard the door to the bathroom open and close. I remember smiling to myself, thinking he was going to join me in the shower for some playtime. I was in the middle of rinsing the conditioner out of my hair when I heard the shower curtain slide open.
Decided you wanted a quickie before bed, eh?
I asked, still rinsing my hair.
Sounds good to me.
A voice said that was not my boyfriend's. The voice sounded gravelly and low. About that time, I felt ice-cold hands grab my shoulders from behind. I spun around in horror, only to discover I was in the shower alone. I exited the bathroom in such a haste I did not even bother to grab a towel. Heart pounding and dripping wet, I was now in the front room panting and trying to catch my breath. My boyfriend was shaking uncontrollably and pointing at the bathroom. His eyes were fixed, and he appeared to be in a state of shock. His voice quivering, he whispered,
I saw it go in there.
Fast forward 2 years. We had just moved into another basement apartment. This one was on the other side of town. It too was a house that had been transformed into 2 separate units. The owner of the house and his boyfriend lived upstairs, and they offered a killer deal as far as rent. I think we were paying $200 a month for the 2-bedroom apartment. We had only lived there about 2 months before the demonic activity started up again. There were old-fashioned swinging doors, like you would find in those Western movies, that separated the front room and the kitchen. We had lived in the new place about 2 months, and there was no supernatural activity of any kind. We were thinking maybe that the entity had not followed us to our new home and had begun to truly relax. We were dead wrong. My boyfriend and I had just finished having amazing sex and were settling down to sleep when the saloon doors between the kitchen and the living room began to swing back and forth with a vengeance. The night lights in the kitchen and our bedroom went out, leaving us completely in the dark.
Come play with me.
A demonic voice called out to my boyfriend from the kitchen. It was so loud it echoed through the entire apartment. Still shrouded in complete darkness, he and I both shook uncontrollably under the covers. We began to quietly argue over who was going to make a break for the light switch located on the wall by the door. Not knowing what else to do, I yelled for it to leave in Jesus' name. The entity roared so loudly I swear you could feel the house shake. We could hear the saloon doors fly open, the nightlights came back on, and we were alone again. For how long, we didn't know. It took us about 20 minutes before we could muster up enough courage to move. Needless to say, we did not get any sleep that night, and had every light in the place on. Fast forward another couple of weeks. Our company for the evening had just left, and my boyfriend and I had settled in our recliners in the front room to watch a movie and chill for the remainder of the evening. A loud knock on the front door, signaling one of our friends had probably forgotten their car keys or something, caused my boyfriend to pause the movie and head to the door. He stopped short and shot me a concerned look. Puzzled, I asked him if he was going to get the door or not. He pointed out the motion-censored light was not on. Opening the door, he visibly shivered as there was nobody there and no vehicles in the drive but our own. As he shut the door, there came a loud crash and the sound of glass breaking from the kitchen. Walking into the kitchen, it took me a minute to figure out what had happened. The coffee pot that was tucked into the corner by the sink was now laying in a zillion pieces on the dining room table. The knocking started up again on the front door. Again, no light to indicate someone was actually there. Then the knocking switched to the back door. Actually, it was more like pounding. The pounding was hard and loud, and I was sure that the door was going to cave in. The air became thick and heavy, so much that it was hard to breathe. That was enough for us that night. My boyfriend and I bolted out of the house and spent the remainder of the night at a local Denny's restaurant drinking coffee, too terrified to return to the house until morning. Now, fast forward another couple of years. By this time, we had found a beautiful 2-story home to rent. We loved it, because there was a spiral staircase between the 2 floors. The front door led you to the main floor of the home, where the kitchen, dining room, and living room were. The back door leads you to the basement, where the bedrooms and bathroom were located. It was a way cute little house, and we loved it. That is, until the entity found us again. I say this because after each move, It seemed it took it a while to either find us or decide to show it had anyway. I would usually dream I was standing in a large room with doors all around it. In the dream, all the doors would all start slamming shut one at a time as I ran from door to door trying to escape. As the last one would slam shut, the room would fill with demonic laughter, which is how I knew that it had found us again. The night after having this dream, my husband and I were downstairs in our bedroom putting our laundry away when we heard my mother hollering down at us from the top of the stairs to come up and visit with her. We shot one another a confused look because my mother lived about 55 miles away and never came over without calling first. That and both the front and back doors were locked. Thinking maybe my mom had made a copy of our house key, and of course not wanting to be rude, I headed upstairs to visit, with my boyfriend hot on my heels. As I approached the top of the stairs, I could see the front door was still locked, and there was no sign of my mom anywhere. The temperature in the living room had dropped drastically, causing me to shiver. As I moved into the living room, my boyfriend walked to the front door, opened it, and confirmed that no car was in the driveway. That is when we both saw a large black mass make its way slowly across the wall from the kitchen into the dining room. Its slow movement appeared to be deliberate, as if it wanted us to see it. As it moved through the dining room into the front room, my mother's picture flew off the wall, past me, and went straight down into the basement. As the years progressed, so did the entity's activities. It had gotten so bad that even our friends and family refused to come over. They too would see the black mass, witness things moving on their own, and heard disembodied voices calling their names. One morning, I had just arrived home from a 13-hour night shift and had settled on the couch to watch some television before heading to bed. Out of nowhere, there was a huge boom. It sounded like a bomb had gone off. The whole house, and I do mean the whole house, began to shake violently. It only lasted about 10 seconds or so. I am not sure, because it felt much longer than that. I quickly ran outdoors thinking that maybe a gas main in the neighborhood had exploded, or maybe we had had an earthquake. All was calm and still. No one else seemed to even be aware that something major had just happened. As I was on the phone to the police department reporting what had just happened, my boyfriend and my brother, who had stayed the night in our guest room, came tearing upstairs in a panic. Their faces were pale white, and you could see that they were truly terrified. The police assured me that nobody else had reported anything, and that maybe it was just my house settling. My brother said the house shook so violently it shook him right out of bed onto the floor. I knew then that it was the demon, and it was time to try to rid ourselves of it once and for all. I had several ministers, priests, and mediums come to my house. The mediums were at least more helpful than the religious men, who were too afraid to do anything at all and simply said, "Pray," and left. I finally found a minister who specialized in deliverance ministry. She was well versed in dealing with demonic activity and getting rid of it. She was able to ascertain the demon's name, which gave her power over it, or Jesus, whatever. She told me it was not her exorcising the demon, but rather the power and blood of Jesus. I also learned that the demon was not actually attached to me, but rather to my boyfriend. I learned the reason it always took the demon a while to show back up was the cleansing rituals that I had been doing were working to a point, but that my boyfriend was the one that kept opening up the door, so to speak, for it to return. I was not aware of it at the time. But he had not only been dabbling with witchcraft, but he was also meeting strangers in the graveyard for sex, since the cops heavily patrolled the city parks. They were once a hotspot for random hookups and drug use. Needless to say, I was able to finally rid myself of the demon and my boyfriend. Unfortunately for him, the demon followed him and his life quickly fell apart. He got into drugs, alcohol, and worse. He passed away last year expectantly. We remained friends over the years and would talk on the phone or text. I spoke to him a week before his death, and he had told me that he was still being tormented by the demon. I have no idea what actually happened to my ex. It has all been kind of hush-hush. I just pray that he is at peace now.